I've got a reply from Ofcom, and if you've been following my channel, you'll know this is an issue I felt strongly about. Just a bit of background, Ofcom is the UK's independent media regulator. They have the responsibility to see that broadcasters adhere to a code of conduct in terms of impartiality and in terms of professional standards that are expected of broadcasters in the UK. And they have the power to impose penalties through financial fines and even take away or grant licenses to broadcasters. Now, I have long felt that Ofcom has been far too weak in the way it has dealt with both RT and CGTN. RT is a Russian state broadcaster, CGTN, Chinese state broadcaster. Um, I'm just going to read out a bit of the response. I'll try and put a link to this if I can. Um, I'm not going to read out the whole thing in this video because it's quite lengthy, but I'm not particularly happy with it and it hasn't really given me assurance of their attitude to this. So the first paragraph reads, Dear Mr. Hazlett, thank you for getting in touch. You have raised concerns about two Ofcom licensed services, RT and CGTN. Specifically, you have said that these two services are weapons of misinformation and propaganda against the British state. One of the fundamental requirements for all Ofcom licensed broadcasters is that they must adhere to the rules in the Broadcasting Code. These rules reflect Ofcom's regulatory duties set out in the Communications Act 2003. In particular, Section 5 of the Code sets out requirements on all our licensees in the area of due impartiality and due accuracy. In summary, these rules require that TV and radio news is presented with due impartiality and reported with due accuracy, and due impartiality is preserved in other programming which covers matters of political or industrial controversy and/or matters relating to current public policy. It is important to note that the broadcasting of highly critical comments concerning the policies and actions of, for example, any one state or institution is not in itself a breach of due impartiality. It is in fact essential that current affairs programmes are able to explore and examine issues and take a position, even if that is highly critical. However, a broadcaster must maintain an adequate and appropriate level of impartiality in its presentation of news and or matters of political controversy and matters of current public policy. What I read that as is them saying that just because RT is biased against Britain and its coverage of Britain being highly critical, that doesn't in itself mean impartiality. The problem is, it isn't just that RT is very critical of Britain, both from a governmental and social point of view, they're actively promoting the Russian foreign policy. So they're not just being critical of one side, they're actively promoting another. Now, under any definition, that is impartiality. And Ofcom must be able to see that. Um, and they continue, and this is not verbatim because time reasons. I'll put a link to this. While viewers, I mean, it's not verbatim, and I'm not reading out everything here because I want to. I'll put a link to it. While viewers of RT and CGTN will likely expect news and current affairs programming to reflect a Russian or Chinese perspective as appropriate, this does not obviate the need for these broadcasters to adhere to our due impartiality rules. We assess every complaint we receive against the code and also conduct routine monitoring of our licensees' output to ensure content complies with our rules. One can be filled with that. If we identify a potential breach of the rules, we take robust action against the broadcaster, and in most serious cases, this has resulted in Ofcom imposing a statutory sanction, including revoking a broadcaster's license. We have carried out some significant enforcement action against both RT and CGTN. Significant enforcement action, details of which I lay out below. And I'm just going to quote this because I'm not satisfied with it. I really don't think it says a lot. Last year, we levied our largest fine for a breach of our due impartiality rules when we imposed a financial penalty of £200,000 against RT's licence holder. This related to 7 due impartiality breaches of RT's coverage of various issues, including events in Salisbury in 2018 and the Syrian war. Some of these investigations were launched as a result of Ofcom's own routine monitoring. While we've assessed a small number of complaints about content broadcasts on RT since the conclusion of these investigations, none of these complaints have raised issues warranting investigation under our rules. We will continue to assess any complaints we receive about RT's output and take further action if necessary. Well, I don't think that's good enough. Okay, on the surface, £200,000 sounds like a hefty fine. But like I say, remember this is backed by the Russian state, so it's really a pittance when you consider the political power behind it. But also, how has RT dealt with this? They haven't said, okay, sorry, we will improve our standards. They've responded with scorn and ridicule. Look at their attitude after the Salisbury attack, and look at the attitude of RT's CEO spokeswoman. It was pure scorn. Um, if it was in court proceedings, would be considered contempt of court. So RT hasn't taken this seriously at all. CGTN. On the 26th of May 2020, we announced five due impartiality breaches against CGTN in relation to its coverage of the Hong Kong protests during 2019. Four of these investigations were as a result of routine monitoring of CGTN's output. As you will see from these published decisions, we have indicated that we are minded to consider these breaches for the imposition of a statutory sanction. We have indicated that we are minded to consider these breaches for the imposition of a statutory sanction. To me, that's watered down nonsense. Minded to consider. Watered down. Weak. We are also investigating several fairness and privacy complaints from individuals about programs in which they appeared, which were broadcast on CGTN. Given the nature of these complaints, we are unable to reveal the specific details of these investigations. However, I can confirm these investigations are ongoing. It's important to say that Nick Pollard, because I'd cited this man, was no longer a member of Ofcom's content board. Media newspaper reports suggested that he was employed by Ofcom when he was employed by CGTN, and Ofcom takes no view about his personal decision regarding his employment. While I understand your concerns about the alleged conduct of a CGTN reporter, this was in reference to Kong Ling Lin. Ofcom's remit relates to what a service broadcasts to its audience, rather than issues relating to individual CGTN employees. Okay, but this surely builds up the case against CGTN, even if they can't act on that individually. Surely it demonstrates the sort of attitude that CGTN has to the host nation that it's broadcasting in. If you do have concerns about any specific pieces of TV and radio content, then you should make a complaint to us. Information on how to do this can be found here, yada, 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 Ofcom standards team. Not good enough. Really not good enough. So they haven't even fined CGTN. They say that we have indicated that we are minded to consider these breaches for the imposition of a statutory sanction. Minded to consider. As far as I'm concerned, that is just watered down weakness. And I replied, I tried to be diplomatic, I tried to be polite, but I had to say bluntly, look, I say polite, but I wasn't going to be overly sanitizing what I feel about this. Because I feel they're appeasing. I feel they are appeasing these networks by not issuing the full power that they have available, which is to strip the licenses completely. I see no rational reason why they don't at this point. Um, CGTN is a network that has aired forced confessions, right? Peter Humphrey, British private investigator, arrested on charges of espionage in China. He had to endure going through a forced confession in a Chinese court. CGTN filmed, degrading. This was a kangaroo trial. Yet CGTN still operates in Chiswick, West London. Now, I notice in the response they've totally failed to address that point. I raised it in my initial complaint and they failed to address it, just ignoring it. Um, that may in itself not necessarily come down to impartiality. I would say it does, but they may find some way to, word their way around that to say that we can only do this, we can only do that. Here's the thing: in 2011, Ofcom did strip the license of Press TV, the Iranian state broadcaster, over impartiality concerns. Now, I recall Press TV; it was a biased source, it was very pro-Iran regime, but it didn't do anything worse than what CGTN and RT are doing. Yet they are still not taking the full measures available to them. Why not? I think it's a disgrace. I think Ofcom is showing weakness. And I told them quite plainly, if you cannot, as our state broadcaster, excuse me, as our state regulator, if you cannot recognize the obvious problem that's going on here, if you cannot see what these networks are doing, they clearly do breach Ofcom's own guidelines, but it sounds like their response to CGTN is just watered down vague threats rather than actually concrete action. Maybe things will happen in the coming months. I doubt it, but maybe Ofcom will finally get its act together and take real action against these networks. Personally, I think they should be have their licenses stripped completely. The argument about free expression, the point about free expression is it has responsibility, and I do not think that any state should host networks that are deliberately trying to undermine our stability, undermine undermine our actual sovereignty. With the way RT and CGTN broadcast things, it's not just that they're critical of Western foreign policy. That I wouldn't like it, but I would accept. Okay, you can't penalise them for that in of itself. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh, just take away their license because I don't like their politics. Um, that's not the issue. The issue is they are breaching our regulations, they are breaching impartiality rules, and they are broadcasting for hostile states. This may as well be Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping speaking. They're both motivated by ultranationalism. RT promotes conspiracy theories. CGTN is it's less openly jingoistic, but behind the scenes, it's definitely motivated by nationalism. Um, I think the fact that Ofcom has ignored what Peter Humphrey went through is repugnant. I think it's moral cowardice on their part. Someone in a position of authority in Ofcom has the power to make that decision and say, okay, we've given them these warnings, they haven't changed. Now we're going to take the maximum penalty. We're going to strip their license. So why are they not doing that? This is not a new thing. It's not like they've just been alerted to this or they've just discovered it and they're oh well, we need to investigate it. They've been investigating both networks for a long time by their own admission. So what is it going to take for Ofcom to get backbone and do something about this? Some people might say I'm being too harsh and they need to go through all the, cross all the T's and dot all the I's. I'm not saying they should just arbitrarily strip their license because they happen to be from hostile foreign states. Yeah, I support fairness. Yes, there should be evidence for it. But there is. That's the point. There is abundant evidence to show that these networks have breached our regulations. Abundant. And Ofcom just will not take action. So, frankly, I said semi sarcastically, um, maybe you're scared of the Chinese embassy. Okay, it was a bit rude on my part, but I'm not happy with these watered down sort of, we are minded to take. Minded to take is meaningless. Minded to take, either you do it or you don't. It's not good enough. And I really do think that it's possible that they are reluctant to upset the Chinese embassy in particular. We have seen how the Chinese embassies around the world try their best, try their level best to undermine Western democracies. So no one should be so naive as to think that the Chinese embassy, backed by the Chinese state, doesn't have the power and arrogance to try and put coercive pressure on something like Ofcom. And then, of course, they'll whine, oh, what about their freedom of speech? What about Western freedom of speech? Um, I really think that I'm disheartened, I'm angry, and I've done everything I can do. I've contacted Ofcom, I've launched a petition. I don't know what else I can physically do other than getting a placard and protesting outside Ofcom's headquarters, which I'm not going to do because I don't live in London and, there's still the COVID restrictions. If I lived in London, I'd be tempted to do it. I really would. I'd make a peaceful protest at what I regard as Ofcom's appeasement. Because fines is all very well, but faced with the level of threat that we are facing, in my opinion, this is nothing but watered down weakness. I mean, I honestly think it would be the moral equivalent of in the late 1930s allowing Joseph Goebbels to broadcast in the United Kingdom. I don't know, maybe that did happen, but Ofcom didn't exist then. I really do think it's a moral equivalent. I believe the Chinese regime is is evil. I think some of the things it's done can only be described as the evil tactics of a totalitarian state. And the Russian regime has definitely showed its malevolent intentions against its country. I'm well aware if, RT and CGTN had their license stripped, there'd be reprisals against the BBC and Sky News in Russia and China. That's the state we're at, and it's something that Putin and Xi have brought on. If there's a new Cold War, it won't have been started by the West. Because, I mean, in the case of Russia, are you really going to say that Putin's right and six American presidents, what is it? No, four American presidents and five British prime ministers are wrong, but Putin's right? No, I don't buy that. Um, in the case of American presidents, I'm talking about from Clinton to Trump, and in the case of British prime ministers, from Blair to Johnson. I just feel so frustrated. I admit there's some patriotic feelings at play here because I don't like to see my country being undermined. But once again, this is just typical British sitting on the fence. We'll look at something, we'll investigate it, and we'll sit on the fence, and we'll investigate it again, and we'll reinvestigate it, and we will give vague warnings, maybe the odd fine here and there. We won't take concrete action. It's the same with much government policy. Again, Johnson is taking a more robust line with China now, but it's taking time. Um, and I'm not saying, by the way, we should be hawkish and gung ho about everything. That's really, really not what I'm saying. But I do think we should be more assertive because I think this is undermining our sovereignty. I really, really do see this as an existential threat. I believe RT is as dangerous as any missile because of the misinformation, because of its promotion of conspiracy theories, and because of its promotion of the Russian state. And sadly, a lot of people are taken in by it. You go to RT's comment section, it's nothing but echo chamber stuff about how great Putin is and about how awful the West is. RT fully endorses all the schisms that are going on in the West right now. So does CGTN. I mean, they love the racial tensions. They absolutely love what's happening with Black Lives Matter and all the debate around that. It's not a case they're just reporting it as news outlets. They are loving this. They say, "Oh well, look, this is great. This gets to show how weak democracy is and how superior we are." It's just it angers me, to be honest. So I'll try my best to put a link. It was done in a PDF format, so I'm not sure if it's possible to do that, but I will try to put a link so people can see Ofcom's official response to me um, and my concerns about their malign influence. Thanks for watching.